Hey Kipsters, hope you're having a pretty good day so far. I know you rocked it out on your quiz, so it's time for us to move to our next objective, hypoxic zones. During this time, you will be able to describe how hypoxic zones are created. Let's go ahead and get started. You'll see in this picture here that there is an area of land that's a much different color than the rest of the ocean. This is in fact the Gulf of Mexico. Today we're going to talk about why is this area a much different color than the rest of the ocean. So a hypoxic zone is an area in the ocean with dead marine life caused by low oxygen levels. It's an area of land where you see that there's very few fish, there's very few examples of plant and animal wildlife. You can see in the picture here that this body of water is a much different color than what we would usually expect water to be. And that's because it's a hypoxic zone. It's an area where many plants and animals can't grow and they can't live because the oxygen level is just too low to survive. We're going to talk about how those hypoxic zones are created. So how do hypoxic zones form? First, fertilizers from farms run off into rivers and oceans. As you can see in this picture here, farmers use fertilizers to help their crops grow. However, when it rains, that same fertilizer that was once on their farm runs off into nearby rivers, streams, ponds, and eventually into bigger bodies of water like the ocean or the Gulf of Mexico. So why is that such a problem? Well, fertilizers contain a nutrient called nitrate. Nitrate comes from the word nitrogen. And nitrogen or nitrate causes algae to form in oceans. So fertilizers contain nitrate, which is a form of nitrogen, and nitrogen from those fertilizers make algae grow like crazy. It's kind of like steroids for algae. As soon as algae gets a hold of nitrate, it begins to multiply really quickly and algae forms and grows on the top of the water. So you can see here that all of this green stuff on the top of the water is algae. This area or this body of water has a lot of fertilizer and nitrate in it, and that's why algae has grown so rapidly here. Those big blooms of algae are often called algal blooms. So a community of algae we often refer to as algal blooms. Well, the next step is that once these algal blooms or community of algae die, they sink to the bottom of the ocean and are decomposed by millions of bacteria. So you can see in this picture here, this is a piece of algae that's sinking down to the bottom of the ocean because it is now dead, and bacteria, which are decomposers, start to break down that dead algae. The problem comes when there is so much bacteria to eat the dead algae that the bacteria take up all the oxygen from the water. There's essentially no oxygen left for other organisms to live because all of the bacteria are eating the dead algae in the water. So the last and final step is that without oxygen, other plants and animals can't survive. This creates a dead zone or hypoxic zone. You'll see that these words are often going to be used interchangeably. Sometimes you may see the word dead zone, and sometimes you may hear the word hypoxic zone. But you can see in the picture here the dead fish that's on top of the water, and the other dead animal that's on top of the water here is because this body of water has so little oxygen that other animals and plants can't survive. So let's summarize. We talked about how fertilizer from farms seep down into rivers or oceans. And then that fertilizer, because of the nitrate, causes algae to bloom and to grow, like what you see here. Eventually that algae dies and the dead algae goes to the bottom of the ocean, and then bacteria begin to eat away at the algae. The bacteria, the millions and millions of bacteria, take up all the oxygen so other plants and animals can no longer live. So you'll see here some of the dead fish float to the surface, and there's very few organisms that can survive. That's all for your notes. Go ahead and begin the classwork section or the practice section on your paper now.